Husband, let's put the wedding on hold for now. I want to marry Pei Wei first. What did you say? I stared at her. Zhong Yicheng didn't look at me. Instead, she reached out and hooked her arm around the man beside her. Don't be so excited, she frowned. I'm just going through the motions. Once the spotlight dies down, I'll get divorced, and in the end I'll still marry you. I let out a laugh, though my voice was a little cold. Then what am I supposed to be? She finally looked at me, seeming a little impatient. Weren't you always so rational? If Pei Wei is forced to marry that cripple, his life will be ruined. So what? I asked. So help me, you should be able to understand. It was only at that moment that I understood she wasn't asking me, she was informing me that she had already arranged my place for me. Honey, let's put our wedding on hold for now. I'm going to marry Pei Wei first. You should be able to understand me, right? When those words fell, my mind went blank for a moment. The crystal chandelier in the living room was dazzlingly bright. Zhong Yicheng stood before me, her makeup flawless and her tone gentle, as if she were talking about something utterly ordinary. She didn't even wait for me to speak before she stepped aside and looped her arm through Pei Wei's. The motion was too natural, so natural it felt as if it had been rehearsed countless times. Just help me out, will you? She looked at me, her brows and eyes carrying a trace of pleading, yet without any hesitation. If Pei Wei really gets forced by the Fang family to marry that cripple, his life will be ruined. Only then did I truly come back to my senses. Done. What about me? Help you? My throat tightened a little, but my gaze grew clearer and clearer. Then what am I supposed to be? I shook off her hand. The motion wasn't hard, but it made her freeze for a moment. We grew up together since childhood, and the marriage was arranged by our families. The news of our engagement spread through the circle half a year ago. I lowered my voice. Now you want to call off the engagement and marry the poor student your parents have been supporting instead? Have you thought about me, about the Chow family, about how the people in the company will look at me? I'm Chow Zhe, the current head of the Chow group. An engagement was never just a matter of feelings. Zhong Yicheng frowned, as if my question had irritated her a little, but she still patiently explained. Don't make such a big deal out of it. I'm just going through the motions with Pei Wei first. Once the heat dies down, I'll divorce him, and in the end I'll still marry you. She spoke very quickly, as if it were an answer she had long prepared. We've had this many years of feelings between us. How could there be any impact? I stared at her and suddenly felt a strange sense of unfamiliarity. What she called just a formality meant making me a laughingstock in front of everyone. What she called no impact meant assuming I would definitely stay where I was and wait for her. Pei Wei had remained silent the whole time. He stood beside her, wearing an ill-fitting suit. His back was held straight, but his eyes remained lowered. It was a very subtle posture, as if he were avoiding something, yet also waiting for someone to speak for him. I know him, Pei Wei, the financially disadvantaged student sponsored by the Zhong family. With excellent grades and a quiet temperament, over the years, he had come and gone from the Zhong household more often than many relatives. I just never thought that one day he would stand here in this role. Do you think I would agree? I asked. Zhong Yicheng's expression froze for a moment, then relaxed again. You will, she said with great certainty. You've always been very rational, and the most sensible, considerate. Those two words seemed to fall lightly onto my face. She wasn't asking me. She was arranging me. I suddenly thought of many things from the past. She cancelled the date at the last minute, and I had my assistant reschedule my itinerary. She was in a bad mood, so I cancelled a meeting to keep her company. She said Pei Wei was pitiful, so I gave him an internship slot. Again and again, I gave in, and she took it for granted. Then have you ever thought about what if I don't understand? I asked. She was visibly stunned for a moment. Zhe, don't be like that. I had no choice. When she said that, her hand was still resting on Pei Wei's arm. I looked at that hand and suddenly felt it was ironic. The one with no choice is me, right? I gave a slight laugh, but there was no emotion in it at all. The engagement was something you agreed to. The news was released by your family, and now the one who wants to go back on it is you. You say there's nothing you can do, and you want me to just swallow it. Zhong Yicheng's patience was finally exhausted. Why do you have to put it so harshly? I've already been very considerate of your feelings. I nodded. Take care to say, right in front of me, that you want to marry someone else. Pei Wei finally spoke. Mr. Chow. His voice was not loud, but it was very clear. I'm the one who's sorry in this matter. When he said this, his gaze finally lifted and looked at me, his eyes carrying a complicated mix of emotions. There was guilt, nervousness, and a hint of expectation buried very deep. I understood. He was waiting for me to take a step back. You don't need to apologize to me, I said indifferently. If you're getting married, it has nothing to do with me. His expression stiffened for a moment. Zhong Yicheng, however, let out a sigh of relief, thinking my attitude had softened. Zhe, I knew you'd understand. Once this period is over, you're overthinking it. I interrupted her. The living room fell silent all at once. That's all I have to say. Her expression changed. what do you mean? I looked at her and said, word for word, the moment you decided to marry him, it was already over between us. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to argue, but the words didn't come out right away. She probably never thought I would say something like that. Over the years, she had gotten used to me standing on her side. Don't be rash, I'm just temporary. You don't need to explain anymore. My tone was very calm. Which path you choose is your decision. I turned around, picked up my coat, and didn't look at them again. When I reached the door, I paused. This matter ends here. 02. The moment the door closed behind me, I didn't look back. It's not that I wasn't angry, it's that I knew clearly that saying even one more word would only push the situation toward the direction she wanted even more. Just as the car drove out of the Zhong family villa district, my phone rang. The name that popped up on the screen was Zhong Yicheng's mother. I didn't answer right away. The streetlights outside the car windows flashed past one by one, and the light and shadows stretched into long lines across the windshield, yet my emotions were unusually clear. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, they were just waiting for the right time to say it out loud. It wasn't until the phone rang for the third time that I pressed answer, as the other person's tone was gentle, as if deliberately lowering their voice. Don't take what happened just now to heart. I held the steering wheel, my tone calm. If you have something to say, you can say it directly. There was a 1-second silence on the other end. Yicheng is still young, and she's soft-hearted. She can't bear to see people suffer. You also know Pei Wei's situation. He really has nowhere left to turn. I listened without interrupting. You're someone who does important things. Why bother arguing with a child? If this gets out, it won't be good for anyone. It won't be good for anyone. I understood exactly what that meant. Among the bad people, the Zhong family was not included. So, I asked. She seemed not to have expected me to ask that in return, and her tone faltered for a moment. Our two families have had so many years of ties. We can't let one incident ruin everything. If you take a step back, people outside will naturally remember your kindness. Step back. I let out a soft laugh. Auntie, the engagement was your idea, and the date was set by you. Now, the ones wanting to change it are you. I shouldn't be the one to step back. The tone on the other end was clearly several degrees colder. Ace, don't put it so absolutely. You're emotional right now. Think it over. Again, once you've calmed down. I didn't say anything else and just hung up. The moment the call ended, I actually felt even clearer in my heart. They weren't here to discuss it, they were here to pressure me. The next morning, as soon as I arrived at the company, my assistant followed me into the office. Mr. Chow, a few people on the board are asking about the wedding, and some are saying there's already some chatter outside. I took off my coat and said in a flat tone, normal, respond. According to procedure, no need to explain too much. The assistant nodded, though he was visibly a little hesitant. One more thing, the Zhong family wants to arrange a dinner. I looked up at him. Turn it down. They said it's just family getting together for a bit, then there's even less reason to go. I sat down to handle the paperwork, as if nothing had happened, but in the company, there was never a shortage of eyes. At the morning meeting, as soon as I walked into the conference room, several gazes fell on me at the same time. There was curiosity, sympathy, and also an uncontrollable curiosity. I pretended not to see them and sat down directly. The meeting went very smoothly, with no deviations in the project, funding, or timeline. Someone cautiously broached the subject. Mr. Chow has had a lot of personal matters lately. I closed the file and looked up at him. Personal matters do not affect business. If you're concerned about the project, you can stay behind and talk about it separately. The man immediately fell silent. After the meeting adjourned, someone deliberately stayed behind. How do you plan to handle this? It was a veteran who had been with the company for many years. I didn't beat around the bush. Handle it according to the rules. Whose business it is, it's theirs. He looked at me, nodded, but let out a sigh. Your temper is still the same as always. At noon, I didn't go to the cafeteria and just had a quick bite in the office. The phone rang. Again, it was an unfamiliar number. I answered, and the person on the other end sounded a little nervous. Mr. Chow, this is Pei Wei. I leaned back in my chair and said nothing. About Yicheng, I want to explain something to you. I know you're upset. What is there to explain? I asked. He was clearly momentarily at a loss for words. I didn't mean it. If it weren't for the Fang family pressing too hard, I wouldn't have. Pei Wei, I interrupted him. He stopped. With your current status, you don't need to explain to me. If you want to get married, it's not up to me to agree. The line went quiet for several seconds, but I don't want you to misunderstand. Yicheng still has feelings for you. When I heard that, I finally frowned. Her feelings have nothing to do with me, and your choices don't need my blessing. I hung up the phone and didn't give him another chance to keep talking. In the afternoon, someone from the Zhong family still came over. It wasn't Zhong Yicheng, but her Father, when he appeared at my office door, he looked much calmer than he had on the phone last night. Let's talk. I motioned for my assistant to leave after the door closed. He got straight to the point. We really didn't think this through properly as a family, but now that the die is cast, if you keep holding out, it won't do you any good. Who does that benefit? I asked. He was silent for a moment. At least, it won't make things too ugly. I looked at him. You think it looks bad now? Because I didn't cooperate. If I nodded, the ones looking bad wouldn't be you. His expression changed slightly. You're forcing us into this. I'm not the one forcing. You're the ones making the choice. The air seemed to grow still for a moment. He stood up, lowering his voice. As feelings can be developed further, if you miss the position, it's very hard to get it back. I also stood up, my tone equally calm. Position is never something other people hand over to you. He looked at me for a long time, but in the end said nothing and turned to leave. 03. The news that Zhong Yicheng was getting married was not something she told me. It was when the assistant handed me the itinerary that he mentioned it in passing. Mr. Chow, tonight's business reception is at Yunling Club. He paused. At the same time, over at the Zhong family's place, they're holding a wedding. I nodded and took the document. Proceed as planned. The assistant did not ask any further questions. The Zhong family held that wedding very discreetly. The venue was chosen at an inconspicuous hotel in the south of the city, and the guest list was kept tightly controlled, deliberately avoiding anyone associated with the Chow family. This arrangement, in itself, said a great deal. They didn't want to make a big deal out of it, yet they still wanted to see things through. I didn't go. After the afternoon meeting ended, I went straight back to the office and changed clothes. The person in the mirror looked no different from usual. The suit was well tailored, and the tie was on the darker side. With no extra embellishments, I stood for a few seconds, making sure I was fine. Before heading out, the lights at Yunling Club were bright. As soon as I entered, I was stopped by a few acquaintances. Boss Chow, long time no see. What big project have you been busy with lately? I responded briefly, my attitude neither warm nor cold. Soon, I noticed the atmosphere in the venue was a bit subtle. People's gazes lingered on me longer than usual. Some people wanted to speak but held back, while others simply pretended not to know anything. I didn't need to guess to know what they were thinking. They were waiting for me to show even a hint of emotion, whether it was disappointment or anger. As long as I wasn't composed enough, it would be interpreted as something else. I just don't plan to give it. Halfway through the reception, someone came up to me holding a wine glass. It was the head of the investment firm I had worked with once. Mr. Chow, I heard you've had some trouble at home lately. I looked at him, my tone calm. Personal matter. He smiled, as if relieved. Good then. I was worried it might affect our cooperation. No, the project will go on as usual. He nodded, visibly relieved. This reaction was more genuine than any comfort. What they cared about was never my feelings, rather, whether I could still stand in my original place. I raised my glass and made a brief round of polite toasts. We talked about the project, the progress, and the next steps. Every sentence landed exactly where it was supposed to. Someone finally couldn't hold back. President Chow, you're in good form tonight. I glanced at him. In a work setting, shouldn't I be in good form? He froze for a moment, then smiled and nodded. I spoke out of turn. I didn't press further, and I didn't explain. The banquet ended earlier than expected. When I was leaving, I ran into a familiar director at the doorway. He looked at me, his gaze complicated. You didn't go to the Zhong family's wedding? No, I said. They got married today. I know. He fell silent for a few seconds. You're surprisingly easygoing. I adjusted my cuffs. There's no need to waste time in places we shouldn't go. He was at a loss for words and could only nod. The car drove away from the club, and I leaned back in the rear seat, closing my eyes for a while. The phone had been very quiet all along. It only lit up when I was almost home. It was a message from an unknown number, very short. You really didn't come? I glanced at it and didn't reply. At a time like this, anything I said would be unnecessary. When I got home, I took a shower and changed into loungewear. The night outside the window was quiet, and the city lights seemed sealed off beyond the glass. I sat on the sofa and sent my assistant a message, asking him to move up tomorrow's schedule. Just as I put down my phone, the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door, and saw Zhong Yicheng standing outside. She was wearing a simple white dress, nothing like the splendor of a wedding, but she looked a little tired. The makeup had already been removed, and her eyes were a bit red. Why did you come? I asked. She looked at me, as if trying to find something in my face. I thought you would come. Her voice was very soft. Why would you think that? I asked back. She bit her lip. After all these years. I stepped aside and made room at the doorway. Come in and talk. She came in, her gaze sweeping around the living room. She was very familiar with everything here. She used to be able to come anytime. Now she seemed a bit awkward. Is the wedding over? I asked. She nodded. Did it go smoothly? She was silent for a moment before speaking. Pretty well. I didn't press further. The living room fell silent, with only the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Why aren't you going tonight? She finally couldn't help asking. I have plans, I said. More important than the wedding. I looked at her. Yes, to me, it is. Her expression changed. At once. Are you sulking? No, I'm just distinguishing the occasion. She looked at me, as if seeing me carefully for the first time. Aren't you even a little upset? I didn't answer right away. Being upset doesn't solve anything. You're already married. No matter how upset I am, it won't change anything. Her fingers tightened slightly. You weren't like this before. Before? I thought a lot of things could be discussed. Now I realize, some things can't. She stood up, as if she wanted to say something, but then stopped. Then what about us? From now on, I also stood up. Each of us should live our own life well. She looked at me, and her eyes slowly turned red. Are you really not going to fight for me one more time? I shook my head. There's no need. 04. After that, Zhong Yicheng and I rarely crossed paths again. It wasn't deliberate avoidance. Our lives simply drifted apart naturally. I devoted more time to the company. The project was moving ahead quickly, meetings were packed, and I was switching between different negotiation tables almost every day. Busyness had one good thing about it. It left no room for emotions. Sometimes when someone mentioned her, I just acted as if I hadn't heard it. Her name, to me, was no longer something that required a response. The first time we met again was in a setting that was not very formal. That evening, after I finished a business meeting and said goodbye to my client at the entrance of the restaurant, I turned around and saw Zhong Yicheng not far away. She stood by the roadside, carrying 2 shopping bags, with a somewhat weary expression. Standing beside her was Pei Wei. He was speaking in a low voice, his tone displeased, his brow tightly furrowed. Zhong Yicheng tilted her body to listen, her face showing obvious impatience, yet she still held back and did not interrupt. This scene made me pause in my tracks. It wasn't old feelings at work. The contrast was just too stark. In the past, at gatherings like this, she never had to stand by the roadside waiting for someone, nor would anyone ever speak to her in that tone. She quickly saw me too. Her eyes lit up for a moment, then quickly dimmed again. She opened her mouth, as if wanting to call out to me, but was tugged back by Pei Wei. Watch the road, he said, his tone carrying a hint of restrained irritation. Zhong Yicheng frowned. I know how to watch it myself. He said nothing more, but he was clearly unhappy. I didn't go over, and I didn't greet him at a time like this. Showing up would have been unnecessary. As the car pulled away, I saw in the rearview mirror that she was still standing where she was, no longer looking at me, only lowering her head to say something to Pei Wei. After that day, she called me once. It was on a weekday evening. I had just gotten home, and my phone rang for a long time. The moment I saw the name, I hesitated for a few seconds, but still answered. A's. Her voice was very soft, and she sounded a little tired. Something up? I asked. There was a brief silence on the other end. Are you busy lately? Not bad. I wasn't interested in making small talk. I want to ask you something. Her speech was a little slow, as if she were choosing her words carefully. Pei Wei, when he was interning at your company before, did he perform fairly well? I frowned. Is that really the kind of question you should be asking? She seemed to be choked up. I just wanted to make sure. He's under a lot of pressure right now, and he's not in a very good state emotionally. I was silent for a few seconds. His work ability has nothing to do with your marriage. If there's a problem, resolve it yourselves. A very soft sigh came from the other end of the phone. You wouldn't have said that before. The premise of before no longer exists, I said calmly. You're married. A lot of boundaries should be clear. She said nothing more. A few seconds later, the phone was hung up. At that moment, I suddenly realized that she wasn't really trying to ask about Pei Wei. She just wanted to find back a familiar feeling. Later, her messages began to become fragmented, not a continuous venting, but rather some seemingly casual questions. For example, the background of a certain business partner. For example, details in a contract that are easy to overlook. Before, whenever she brought up these issues offhand, I would help her handle them. Now, I basically don't reply. Occasionally, she would reply, but only with a very simple sentence. You can ask your husband about that. After a few times, she finally stopped. From the fragments of what others said, I gradually pieced together her recent situation. It wasn't that he was deliberately asking around. The circle was just too small. Someone mentioned that the atmosphere in the Zhong family had not been very good lately. Pei Wei's emotions fluctuated greatly, and he was especially sensitive to the gaze of the outside world. He disliked people bringing up financial support and background, and he also didn't want to be treated as an appendage of the Zhong family. Reality, however, simply couldn't get around these things. Caught in the middle, Zhong Yicheng began having frequent friction with her family. She had originally thought that marriage would simply mean a different way of life, but she hadn't expected daily life to be worn down by countless little details. By chance, I saw her again in the parking lot. She was sitting alone in the car. the window half down, holding her phone in her hand, looking absent. Minded, when I passed by, she looked up and saw me, visibly stunned for a moment. I had originally intended to leave directly, but she got out of the car. "Ace," she called out to stop me. I stopped walking. "What's up?" She took a few steps closer, looking a little pale. "You seem to be doing quite well lately. The job's okay," I replied politely. She looked at me and suddenly gave a laugh, but it was forced. "Do you think I am like this now? Very ridiculous. I have no standing to judge your life." I said, "That was your choice." Her eyes reddened slightly. "At the time, I really, just wanted to help him. I didn't expect it to turn out like this." "It's not that you didn't expect the outcome. You just didn't want to think about it back then." She fell silent. "Pei Wei has changed," she said softly. "He wasn't like this before." I looked at her and said nothing. "He always feels that other people look down on him. For even the slightest thing, he'll bring it up and talk about it over and over again. You used to tell me how to deal with these things." She looked up at me. "Now you don't say anything, because that shouldn't have been my job." My tone wasn't harsh, but it was clear. It was as if she'd been struck by those words. She stood there unable to speak. After a long while, she finally spoke. "Did I make the wrong choice?" I did not answer. The question, in itself, had no meaning. She waited for a while, but when no response came, the emotion in her eyes slowly crumbled away. "Forget it." She forced a smile. "I shouldn't have asked you." She turned and got into the car, and when she closed the door, the movement was a little heavy. Before the car started, she gave me one last look. In that look, there was none of the certainty she had before, nor any righteous confidence, only obvious panic. I stood there, watching her car disappear from sight. There was no ripple in my heart. She had finally begun to realize that what she had thought was salvation was not something everyone would cherish, and she herself was also being worn down bit by bit. For the first time, she was truly panicked. 05. During that period, my life gradually returned to its original rhythm. It wasn't a deliberate adjustment. Many things were simply meant to work that way. As the company entered a new phase, several parallel projects moved forward at the same time, and I personally followed up on one acquisition case. The other company had a complicated background, and the negotiations dragged on for a long time. After several rounds, both sides had worn down their patience. I first met Lu Menglan at that meeting. She was sitting across from me, not in one of the front seats, but very quietly. The material was translated slowly, and she didn't speak often, but every time she did, she hit the mark exactly. I noticed her because she interrupted an executive on her own team. "This doesn't hold." Her tone was unhurried, but very certain. "If we go down this path, the risks will be magnified." Later on, the other party was clearly somewhat unconvinced and pushed back with a few words. She didn't argue, she just pushed the file forward a little. "The data is here. It's not a matter of stance, it's a matter of cost." The meeting room fell briefly silent. At that moment, I looked up at her, not the kind of person who flaunts her edge, but her judgments are decisive, with no unnecessary emotion. After the meeting ended, I had my assistant pay a little more attention to her background. Lu Menglan, one of the actual decision-makers at the other company, a clean background, a clear resume, with no trace of deliberate embellishment. The second meeting was a one-on-one working session. She arrived 10 minutes early and had already listed the points that needed to be discussed. Some clauses can be pushed further, but there are 2 items that can't be changed. I looked at her. "Why?" "It's not a matter of compromise, it's about the room for future cooperation." She didn't explain for long, but it was very clear. "Conversations like this are reassuring. You're very familiar with this project." I said, "This is my job." She replied very naturally, "Just like you." She didn't probe, and she didn't deliberately try to get closer. All communication stayed exactly where it was supposed to stay. After the meeting ended, she packed up her materials and prepared to leave. I suddenly asked, "Are you free tonight? Let's have dinner together." She paused and didn't agree right away. "If it's an extension of work, that's fine. If not, I'd like to make that clear in advance." I looked at her and, instead, smiled. "Just dinner, no private matters." She nodded. "Then that works." The restaurant chosen was very ordinary, not for appearances. She made no comment on the surroundings. When ordering, she glanced at me. "Do you have any dietary restrictions?" "No." She nodded and didn't ask any more questions. The meal was quiet, but not awkward. She didn't take the initiative to ask about my past, nor did she deliberately show herself off. The conversation remained centered on work, but it wasn't dull. Her views on many things were, unexpectedly, the same as mine. It wasn't about catering to me, but rather a similar perspective. "You have very high standards for the people you work with," she said suddenly. "Because I don't want to keep wearing myself out over and over." I replied. She smiled. "So am I." In that instant, I realized that she didn't need to be looked after. She knew what she wanted, and she knew exactly where the Boundaries were, after the meal, Shi Zhudong paid the bill. Next time, it's on you, she said naturally. I didn't refuse. That sense of propriety made people feel comfortable. The subsequent few interactions were very natural. Sometimes it was project discussion, sometimes just a coffee along the way. She never appeared at inappropriate times, and she never brought personal emotions into work. Once, because of a schedule delay, I cancelled our meeting at the last minute. She only replied with one line, "Got it, let's meet up another day." No questions, and no emotions. I suddenly realized that in a relationship like this, I didn't need to explain too much. One afternoon, as the project reached a critical stage, we were in the conference room together reviewing the final version of the plan. Time passed a little, and the sky outside the window gradually darkened. She closed the file and glanced at the time. "Let's stop here for today, we'll handle the rest tomorrow." I nodded. "Okay." She stood up and added another sentence, "You've seemed more relaxed lately than before." I looked up at her. "Is there?" "Yes." Her tone was certain. "No one can stay this tense forever." I didn't deny it. She didn't probe further either. This kind of concern, stopping just short of overstepping, is rare. Just before leaving, she suddenly asked me, "Do you have any plans for the weekend?" "Not for now. If you're willing, we can go see an exhibition together." Her tone was calm. "Not for work." I looked at her without hesitation. "Okay." 06. I noticed the change after an ordinary social gathering. That night, I left the club with mainland. The project had reached a milestone, and she rarely relaxed, her tone more casual than usual. "Tomorrow I may not be in the city," she said. "There's an internal meeting." "Okay." I nodded. "We'll make plans when you're back." She answered softly, said nothing more, and turned to get into the car. When the taillights disappeared at the intersection, I stood there for a few seconds before getting back into the car. I was very used to this pace, neither clingy nor distant. They simply understood where the other stood. The next day at noon, I had just finished a meeting when my assistant knocked and came in. "Mr. Chow, someone is here to see you." He paused. "Miss Zhong." I looked up at him. "Say I'm not available. She's already been waiting in the reception room for a while." I closed the file and stood up. 10 minutes. I'm not surprised she came. Lately, she had been showing up more and more often. Either she came directly to see me, or she would create opportunities to meet through some unimportant pretexts. In the reception room, Zhong Yicheng sat very straight. She's dressed very formally today, and her makeup is more refined than the last few times. You can tell she made a deliberate effort to prepare. When she saw me come in, she immediately stood up. "Aze." I motioned for her to sit down. "Say it directly if there's something to say." Her gaze lingered on me for a while. "Have you been spending a lot of time with mainland lately?" I didn't answer right away. "Is this within the scope of what you care about?" I asked back. Her expression changed slightly, but she still held back her emotions. "I just heard about it. It seems like you two are pretty close." "Work-related dealings," I said calmly. "If there's nothing else, I have a meeting to attend." She clearly hadn't expected me to respond like this, and her breathing faltered for a moment. "You weren't like this before. Before, you wouldn't even refuse to give me an explanation." I looked at her. "Before, that was on the premise that you weren't married." As soon as those words fell, her face turned pale for an instant. "Do you have to talk like that? I'm only reminding you of reality." She was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly asked a question. "What is she better than me?" I frowned. "This isn't a comparison, but before, you only had eyes for me." Her voice was very low, but carried clear unwillingness. "Now you can so quickly let someone else stand by your side." "Not switching," I said. "It's about reaching a different position." Her fingers tightened, her nails nearly digging into her palm. "Had you been prepared for this for a long time? Had you been waiting for this day all along?" I stood up. "Zhong Yicheng, you came today not for an answer, but for confirmation." She looked up at me. "Confirm what?" "Confirm whether you've been replaced, but that kind of confirmation won't help you at all." Her eyes suddenly turned red. I said nothing more and turned to leave. The moment the door closed, I heard her suppressed breathing. I didn't look back. That night, she didn't contact me again, but I knew she wouldn't stop there. Sure enough, a few days later, Pei Wei showed up downstairs at the company. It wasn't an official visit, but a wait in the parking lot. When I got off work, I saw him standing by the car, looking clearly upset. "Mr. Chow." When he spoke, his tone was much stiffer than before. "What is it?" I asked. "I want to talk to you." He glanced around. "Just a few minutes." I glanced at the time. "Go on." He clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct and froze for a moment before continuing. "You've been getting very close to mainland recently. This has had a big impact on Yicheng." I looked at him without interrupting. "She's very emotionally unstable right now. You know her personality, yet you still did this. Isn't that a bit inappropriate?" At that point, I finally found it somewhat laughable. Pei Wei, in what capacity are you saying these things to me? His face stiffened. I'm her husband, then you should understand even more. My tone was cold. Her emotions have to do with you, not me, but before you, it had already ended. I interrupted him. The day you got married, it ended. His breathing noticeably grew more rapid. Do you feel like watching us like this gives you a sense of accomplishment? I looked at him. I don't have time to revolve around your lives. Then why don't you just disappear completely? His emotions finally slipped out of control. Why do you still have to appear in her sight? I leaned against the car door and looked at him. Your unease right now isn't because of me. It's because you've realized that she has started comparing. His expression instantly turned ugly. She puts your lives side by side and compares them. If she finds differences, she'll start to waver. This isn't my responsibility. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I straightened up and was about to get in the car. I'll say this one last time. I'm not getting involved in your marriage. Don't come looking for me again. I got in the car and left, not giving him another chance to speak. After that day, Zhong Yicheng's messages became more urgent. They were not questions, but explanations. She explained her choice back then, explained Pei Wei's condition, and explained her current situation. I didn't reply to a single one. It wasn't that I was deliberately giving her the cold shoulder. It was just that there was truly no need to respond. One late night, she called. I watched the screen light up, then go dark again. I didn't answer. The next day, she sent me a message. Can we have a proper talk? Just once. I replied to her. There's no need for that. 07. That meeting was not arranged on purpose. It was a business dinner that had long been scheduled, hosted at a very high level, with only a small number of guests invited, though they were all highly concentrated in one place. I arrived neither early nor late. As soon as I entered the venue, I sensed that the atmosphere was a little subtle. Many eyes lingered on me for a moment, then quickly looked away, as if confirming something. I paid no attention to them, nodded in greeting to a few familiar partners, and followed the waiter's lead into the main hall. Mainland had arrived before me. She was standing near the main table, talking to someone. Her expression was composed, and her tone calm and unhurried. She dressed very restrainedly today. A dark gown, clean lines, with no unnecessary embellishments. When she saw me, she gave me a nod. Without waving or deliberately closing the distance, I walked over to her side and stopped naturally. Just arrived, I asked. She turned her head to look at me. There was a bit of traffic on the way. We stood side by side, our posture casual, yet clear enough. This scene was quickly noticed by the people around us. More people came over to make small talk. Some people took the initiative to greet me, and some steered the conversation toward her. Mr. Chow, who is this? Mainland, I said evenly. A business partner, she added, also a friend. The voice wasn't loud, but it was just right. The other party immediately adopted a more solemn attitude. This change needed no explanation. The position itself was there, so naturally the weight was different. Not long after, I saw Zhong Yicheng. She came in through the side door, holding Pei Wei's arm. Unlike last time, her makeup was exquisite today, and her outfit had been carefully chosen, but the moment she walked in, her steps clearly slowed for a moment. Her gaze quickly fell on me and Mainland. She stopped. Pei Wei followed her gaze and looked over, his expression changing instantly. He subconsciously straightened his back, but he still looked somewhat stiff. Zhong Yicheng quickly withdrew her gaze, as if forcing herself to calm down, and continued forward while holding his arm, but that unnaturalness couldn't be hidden. They were seated not far away, not exactly far, but separated by a few tables, just at a distance where they could be seen, yet not reached. After the dinner began, everything proceeded normally. Speeches, toasts, and conversation. I didn't deliberately avoid them, nor did I deliberately go out of my way to approach them. In some situations, there is simply no need to take the initiative. Change happens on its own. Mainland and I exchanged a few brief opinions, but most of the time we were listening to others speak. She was very familiar with this kind of setting, not cutting people off, but not yielding either. When someone tried to use a flippant tone to get closer, she simply responded politely and quickly steered the topic back on track. This measure left no room for criticism. I noticed that Zhong Yicheng's gaze fell on her several times, not hostility, but a complicated appraisal, as if comparing, and also confirming. Pei Wei clearly noticed it. His mood had been off from the very beginning. Someone came over to greet him and mentioned his background. His smile visibly stiffened for a moment. Mr. Pei, I've long admired you. I heard that with the support of the Zhong family, you did quite well before. This sentence itself had no malice, but when it reached his ears, it felt like a thorn. That's all in the past. His tone turned a little stiff. I have my own plans now. The other person froze for a moment, gave an awkward smile, and turned to leave. Zhong Yicheng said something softly, as if trying to reassure him, but he didn't take it in. Instead, his gaze kept flicking toward me. When the banquet reached its middle stage, the host arranged for free networking. I had just finished talking with a partner and, as I turned around, happened to meet Zhong Yicheng's gaze. She clearly hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. Aze. She stood in front of me, her voice steadier than before. Long time no see. We've met. My tone was flat. Last time, in the parking lot. She froze for a moment, then nodded. You today. Her gaze swept over me, then she glanced at Lu Menglan standing beside me. You look pretty good, not bad. I didn't say more. She was silent for a few seconds, as if organizing her words. Miss Lu. She turned to Lu Menglan. I've heard of you before. Lu Menglan glanced at her, her expression calm. Miss Zhong. She nodded. Hello. No extra emotion, and no deliberate aloofness, just ordinary politeness. For Zhong Yicheng, this calmness was even more piercing. She forced a smile. You two seem very in sync. At work, I added. Lu Menglan did not object, only took the cue and continued. Less trouble for both of us. Those 3 words were spoken very lightly, yet they were very much to the point. Zhong Yicheng's smile was clearly no longer holding up. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something more, but was interrupted by Pei Wei beside her. What are you talking about? He walked over and stood at her side, his tone carrying obvious wariness. Nothing, Zhong Yicheng replied, her tone a little flustered. Pei Wei's gaze fell on me, carrying emotions he couldn't quite suppress. Mr. Chow, he nodded, didn't expect to see you here. The setting is appropriate, I said. Is that so? He gave a slight smile, though it didn't look entirely natural. I thought you'd avoid me on purpose. There's no need for that. His expression instantly darkened. Showing up like this now has a pretty big impact on her. When he spoke, his voice was very low, but it carried emotion. I looked at him. You deal with her feelings yourself. You, Pei Wei. Zhong Yicheng interrupted him, her tone a little anxious. Don't say any more. But it was already too late. Several gazes nearby had already been drawn over. Pei Wei realized this, and his emotions only became even more impossible to hold back. Do you think this is really satisfying, the way things are now? He looked at me, his eyes carrying restrained anger. I gave no response. In situations like this, any explanation is unnecessary. Lu Menglan took half a step forward and stood at my side, neither shielding me nor confronting them, just a very natural position. This is a public place. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it was clear enough. Any private emotions aren't appropriate to deal with here. Pei Wei froze for a moment, as if he hadn't expected her to speak so directly. In that instant, his pride was thoroughly wounded. Who are you two? That's enough. Zhong Yicheng's voice suddenly rose. Her expression had already turned very unpleasant. The murmurs around them gradually grew louder. The organizers came over, trying to ease the tension. Would you like to sit over there for a moment? Pei Wei was about to say something, but Zhong Yicheng grabbed him. Her hand was trembling. Let's go. She almost dragged him away. Before leaving, she looked back at me. In that look, there was no resentment and no blame, only utter collapse. It was as if she finally understood that what she had lost was never just an engagement, it was a place she had once taken for granted. The crowd gradually dispersed, and the atmosphere returned to normal. Lu Menglan looked at me. Do you need to leave early? No, I said. There's no need to disrupt our plans because of someone else's loss of control. She nodded and didn't ask any more. The dinner continued. Some things had already collided quietly, without a sound. When Zhong Yicheng left the stage, she cried. 08. Zhong Yicheng did not appear again for a long time. She did not come to the company again, nor did she reach out to me through anyone else. This silence did not come as a surprise. Some relationships, once the assumptions that sustain them are broken, will only collapse rapidly from there. It was at a dinner gathering that I heard someone mention her recent situation in passing. The tone was very restrained, with no deliberate embellishment. Speaking only of the Zhong family side, things have not been very quiet lately. The conflict between Pei Wei and the Zhong family is no longer just a private friction. It's not about money, but about attitude. He began to emphasize independence more and more frequently, yet he still could not truly break away from the Zhong family's resources. This contradiction made his emotions increasingly sharp. Caught in the middle, Zhong Yicheng realized for the first time that understanding alone could not solve the problem. After I finished listening, I didn't express any opinion. That was no longer my life. My relationship with Lu Menglan became a little clearer after that. It wasn't something I deliberately pushed forward, but rather something that naturally moved ahead through many little details. She began appearing in my schedule more frequently. Sometimes it was work, sometimes it was personal arrangements, but whichever it was, she kept them very clearly separate. Once, when I returned from a business trip, my flight was delayed. By the time I got home, it was already very late, and there was an extra message from her on my phone. We're home, remember to rest. There was no extra concern, and no emotional burden, yet it made me stop and stare for a long time. That feeling was very unfamiliar, not being needed, but being respected. One weekend, we went together to see the exhibition we had mentioned before. There weren't many people, and the environment was very quiet. She walked beside me, occasionally stopping to look closely at the works. Did you used to sacrifice a lot for other people? She suddenly asked. I thought about it. I thought that was part of love. She nodded, without comment. Many people would think that, but in the long run, it's easy to become unbalanced. I looked at her. And you? I care more about standing side by side, she replied calmly, rather than who stands lower. At that moment, I suddenly understood why being with her felt so easy. It wasn't because of anything she did, it was because she never asked me to change my original place. For a while afterward, I focused my energy on an important project, so busy that I was running non-stop. She didn't complain, and she didn't let emotions interfere. She simply stood where she was supposed to when I needed her. After a late-night meeting ended, I returned to the office and found that she was still there. She sat on the sofa, holding a file in her hand. You don't have to wait, I said. I'm on the way. She stood up. Let's go back together. At that moment, I realized this was no longer just a simple working relationship. Instead, the pace of life began to overlap. Zhong Yicheng appeared again on an ordinary afternoon. I had just finished a meeting when my assistant knocked on the door and said she was downstairs. I remained silent for a few seconds, then told someone to bring her up. She looks much more haggard. Her makeup is still exquisite, but it can't hide the fatigue in her eyes. You were willing to see me. I thought you wouldn't. That was the first thing she said after sitting down. Time is limited. I glanced at my watch. Go ahead. Her hands rested on her knees, the fingertips turning slightly white. Pei Wei and I have hit a problem. She got straight to the point. Your husband and wife, I said flatly. You should solve your own problems. Not all problems can be solved. She gave a bitter smile. At least I've realized now that I can't. I said nothing. She looked up at me, her eyes carrying an emotion that was almost shattered. I saw you two at the banquet that night. Only then did I realize that what I had once thought was a choice was actually very childish. It's meaningless for you to say this now. I interrupted her. I know. She nodded. I'm not here to beg you to turn back. That statement surprised me a little. Then what do you want? An answer. She looked at me. If I hadn't done that back then, would we have been different? I looked at her without hesitation. No. She froze. It's not because of what happened later, it's because your choice at the time already said everything. Her tears finally fell. There was no hysteria, just quiet tears. I always thought you would wait for me, she said softly. That was your assumption, I said evenly, not my promise. She covered her face, her shoulders trembling slightly. It was a long time before she stood up. I understand. She walked to the door, then paused again. Are you happy now? I thought of Lu Menglan, and of those moments that didn't need any explanation. Very suitable, I replied. She nodded, said nothing else, and turned to leave. The moment the door closed, I did not hesitate at all. Some answers, once spoken, are the end in themselves. A few months later, Lu Menglan and I got married. There was no lavish ceremony. We only invited those closest to us. That day, she stood beside me, her expression calm and resolute, not dependence, and not concession. It was standing shoulder to shoulder on the stage. I suddenly thought of the person I had been long ago, the one who was used to stepping back, used to understanding, used to giving up his place. He has already been left in the past. The me I am now knows very clearly what I want. Love is not something won by sacrificing one's self-respect. Rather, we choose each other. I'm not the one who was abandoned. I'm the one who chose not to look back.